History class taught us about the wars, the rulers, and the philosophies of ancient Greece and Rome, didn't it? But what about their love stories? The ones that didn't quite fit neatly into those standard textbooks? We're about to peel back the layers of time, digging into dusty scrolls and forgotten ruins, to reveal the surprisingly diverse, complex, and often overlooked attitudes towards same-sex relationships in some of the world's most influential civilizations. From sacred temple rites that might shock you, to the scandalous love lives of emperors, this is the history of queer life they definitely never taught you in school. Are you ready to see what really happened? Because it's a lot more fascinating than you probably imagine. Subscribe and share for more. Section 1, Mesopotamia, Gods, Laws, and Power. Let's start our journey in Mesopotamia, that incredible land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where city-states wrote the earliest laws and built towering ziggurats that practically scraped the sky. Here, the concepts of same-sex acts weren't neatly grouped under a single, modern label like gay or straight. No, it was far more nuanced. Instead, everything hinged on power, specifically, who was on top, both literally and socially. Think about it, a powerful man could penetrate a social inferior, a slave, a servant, or a younger male, without any significant social stigma. It was seen as an assertion of dominance, a reflection of his status. But to play the passive role? That was often deeply shameful, implying a loss of masculinity and status. Equal, consensual male couples? They were certainly rare, and sometimes, depending on the specific city-state and era, even punishable. It wasn't about the act itself, but the context of power and hierarchy. Yet, the temples often told a wildly different story, didn't they? Consider the cult of Inanna, later known as Ishtar, the powerful goddess of love, war, and fertility. Her temples employed gender non-conforming priests, known as Gala or Kurguru. These individuals didn't just exist, they played vital, public roles. They danced in the streets, wore makeup and elaborate clothing, and some even offered their bodies in sacred prostitution. These Gala priests often sang hymns in Emsal, the women's tongue, a distinct dialect, and were considered liminal beings, inhabiting a space between genders, capable of mediating between the human and divine realms. Their very existence blurred the lines of conventional gender and sexuality, suggesting a sacred acceptance of fluidity. In fact, one ancient prayer even explicitly asks the goddess to bless two men who love each other, powerfully demonstrating that religious feeling and spiritual devotion could, and sometimes did, absolutely trump everyday social norms and laws. This wasn't just tolerance, it was sanctification. And what about the legal landscape? The famous Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest and most comprehensive legal codes, is conspicuously silent on homosexuality. It simply doesn't mention it. However, later Assyrian laws show a more complex and frankly, sometimes contradictory, picture. They could swing wildly. You might find fines for slandering a man by accusing him of being the passive partner in a sexual act, clearly indicating a social taboo. Yet, in the very same culture, ritual texts describe male-male union as something holy, part of sacred rites. So what's the message here? It's clear, context mattered profoundly. Power dynamics, religious ritual, and social rank shaped every single encounter and perception. It's a reminder that ancient societies rarely had monolithic views on anything, especially something as complex as human sexuality. Section 2, Greece, Love as Education. Now, let's hop across the Aegean Sea to classical Greece, a civilization we often idealize. Here, the gymnasium wasn't just a place to sweat and sculpt your physique, it was often a vibrant matchmaking zone, a social hub where relationships blossom, sometimes quite literally. Athenian society, particularly among the elite, idealized the Eristes-Eromenos pairing. This wasn't just a casual affair, it was a deeply structured relationship where an older, respected citizen, Eristes, acted as a mentor, a lover, and crucially, a gate opener to civic life for a teenage boy, Eromenos. Modern critics often look back and understandably call it exploitative, given the power imbalance. But for the ancient Greeks? They called it education, pure and simple. It was believed to instill virtue, wisdom, and prepare the younger man for his role in society. The relationship typically concluded once the younger man grew a beard and could, quite literally, carry his own shield in the phalanx, signifying his transition to full citizenship and manhood. It was a rite of passage, albeit one steeped in complex emotional and physical bonds. Philosophers, those intellectual giants of ancient Greece, often staked their reputations on these very bonds. In Plato's early dialogues, like the Symposium, Socrates famously insists that love between men, particularly intellectual and spiritual love, could birth philosophy itself, leading to the creation of profound ideas rather than just biological babies. It was seen as a higher form of love, capable of elevating the soul. However, as Plato aged and his ideas evolved, he seemed to backpedal a bit. In his later work, The Laws, he warns that too much passion, even between men, could weaken soldierly discipline and civic order. A bit of a buzzkill, perhaps, but it shows the ongoing debate within Greek thought. Aristotle, ever the pragmatist, largely shrugged it off. Fine, he seemed to say, as long as nobody loses their social stature or compromises their masculinity. For him, it was more about decorum and social function than inherent morality. Sparta, that famously austere and militaristic city-state, doubled down on male bonding, taking it to an extreme. Their rigorous agoge training system actively paired warriors in intimate couples, believing it fostered fierce loyalty and made them better fighters. But the city of Thebes took this concept even further, creating the legendary sacred band of Thebes, 150 pairs of male lovers who fought side by side. Imagine the ferocity of soldiers fighting not just for their city, but for the life of the person they loved most, standing right beside them. They remained undefeated for decades, a truly formidable force, until Philip of Macedon finally crushed them at Chaeronea in 338 BCE. The story goes that Philip, upon seeing the fallen warriors, wept over their corpses, uttering the poignant words, "Perish any man who suspects these men of doing or suffering anything base." It was a recognition of their courage and devotion, transcending any social judgment about their relationships. And then there's Cybele, the great mother goddess, whose fascinating cult included transgender clergy known as the Galli. These individuals, often foreign in origin, would castrate themselves in frenzied, ecstatic devotion to the goddess, wandering the countryside begging for alms. Greek cities not only tolerated them but often licensed them to parade through the streets, cymbals clashing, long hair flying, a truly arresting public spectacle. Yes, it was public spectacle, but it was also a living, breathing reminder that gender and devotion came in far more than just two neat, conventional flavors. It pushed the boundaries of what was considered normal and provided a space for those who didn't fit traditional molds. Section 3, Rome, Emperors, Slaves, and Double Standards. Rome, that colossal empire, imported Greek culture the way it imported everything else, didn't it? Conquest first, questions later. And when it came to same-sex relations, they adopted many Greek customs, but with a distinctly Roman twist, often characterized by a stark double standard. Elite Roman men could bed male slaves, actors, or gladiators, and society largely looked the other way, provided they rigorously maintained the active, penetrative role. This was seen as an assertion of Roman male dominance, a reflection of their virtus or manliness. However, a freeborn Roman youth who dared to sell his affection or play the passive role risked losing his civic rights, his reputation, and his social standing. Such passive behavior invited the scathing label of effeminacy and, effectively, social death. It was all about maintaining appearances and the rigid social hierarchy. Yet, this same society, with its strict rules, simultaneously elevated same-sex romance to imperial myth. Just think of Emperor Hadrian, who lost his beloved young lover, Antinous, to the Nile in 130 CE. Hadrian mourned so extravagantly that he didn't just cry a few tears, he founded a new city, Antinopolis, struck coins bearing Antinous' image, and ultimately deified the boy, establishing a widespread cult in his honor. To this day, you can still find tourists buying Antinous t-shirts in Egypt, a fascinating example of history's first widely recognized queer icon stamped on mass merchandise, centuries before our time. It's an incredible testament to the power of imperial grief and devotion. And then there were the emperors who truly pushed the boundaries, perhaps even deliberately provoking the establishment. Emperor Nero, for example, married two men in public ceremonies. First, a freedman named Pythagoras, to whom he played the role of bride, and later, a young boy named Sporus, whom he castrated and then married, taking on the role of groom. The Roman Senate, predictably, sneered and whispered, but these imperial marriages, scandalous as they were, stood until Nero's suicide. Later, the teenage priest Emperor Elagabalus, who ruled briefly but memorably, reportedly offered surgeons vast sums to construct a vagina, wore wigs, and greeted his lovers as mistress. Whether these accounts are fact or simply hostile gossip from his many detractors, they undeniably show that gender fluidity, and a fascination with it, occupied a very real space in the imperial imagination and public discourse. It was a world where power could often bend, if not break, conventional norms. However, this relative, albeit status-dependent, tolerance eventually came to a grinding halt. Once Christianity gained significant traction and became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, the legal landscape shifted dramatically. The Theodosian Code of 390 CE, a landmark piece of legislation, prescribed death by burning for the crime of males who engaged in same-sex acts. This marked a brutal turning point. Temple prostitution, which had long been a feature of some cults, was shut down. The Galli, those fascinating transgender priests of Cybele, vanished from public life. A millennium of harsh penalties and persecution began to set in across Europe, but that darker, more rigid chapter, well, that truly belongs to another video. Section 4, Egypt, Celts, and the Limits of Evidence. Now, let's turn our gaze to ancient Egypt, a civilization renowned for its meticulous records, yet one that often keeps its secrets when it comes to personal lives. The evidence here is tantalizingly ambiguous. Take the tomb art of Khnumhotep and Nyankhnum, two male palace officials from around 2400 BCE. Their tomb depicts them embracing, noses touching, an intimate pose typically reserved for husbands and wives in Egyptian art. It's incredibly suggestive. Both men are also known to have married women and fathered children, which complicates things, doesn't it? So, were they brothers, deeply affectionate friends, lovers, or something else entirely? We simply can't pin a modern label on a 4,400-year-old relief with absolute certainty. But the unmistakable affection, the sheer intimacy depicted, certainly sparks curiosity and invites speculation. It's a powerful visual that defies easy categorization. In mythology, however, things get a little clearer, or at least, more overtly suggestive. In the captivating contendings of Horus and Seth, a foundational myth of cosmic politics, Seth, the god of chaos, tries to sexually assault or seduce his nephew, Horus, the rightful heir. The episode isn't just about sex, it's cosmic politics in action: who penetrates whom determines who rules, who holds legitimate power. The tale ends with Horus, advised by his mother Isis, cleverly catching Seth's seed and then tricking Seth into eating his own semen, effectively flipping the power dynamic and humiliating him. For ancient Egyptian listeners, this wasn't just a racy story, it was a powerful lesson. It taught that sex, in its various forms, could either seal or steal legitimacy and control. It was a metaphor for dominance and succession. Beyond the major empires, what about other cultures? Ancient Celtic warriors, for instance, according to classical authors like Aristotle, reportedly preferred male bonding, both in public and private life. This wasn't necessarily about sexual acts, but about intense emotional and physical camaraderie that could include same-sex relationships. No specific Celtic law we know of explicitly banned the practice. The real surprise is often that outsiders, like the Greeks, even noticed and commented on it at all, suggesting it was notable. Meanwhile, in the Hittite Empire of ancient Anatolia, their laws were quite pragmatic. They punished sexual abuse of children regardless of gender, showing a clear concern for vulnerability. But adult, consensual liaisons? Those were largely left untouched by the legal code. The worry, it seems, was about protecting the vulnerable, not about policing the specific anatomy of consenting adults. These examples remind us that different cultures developed very different moral and legal frameworks. CTA, join the conversation. If any of these stories surprised you, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive into history's hidden corners. Drop a comment: which ancient attitude feels most modern to you, Greek mentorship, Roman double standards, or Mesopotamian sacred gender bending? Let's keep talking below. Section 5, Nuance Check, Identity versus Act. Before we wrap this fascinating journey through time, let's do a quick, but crucial, reality check. It's absolutely vital to remember that none of these ancient cultures had a word, a concept, or a social category that neatly maps to our modern understanding of homosexual or heterosexual identity. They simply didn't think in those terms. Instead, they cared deeply about roles: who was active, who was passive, who was a priest, who was a soldier, who was a citizen. They cared about status, power, and ritual. Loving another man didn't make you gay in the way we use the term today. It made you someone's mentor, or someone's joke, or perhaps someone's path to the divine, depending entirely on the context, your social standing, and the specific culture you lived in. Projecting our contemporary identity labels backward onto these ancient peoples isn't just anachronistic, it actually erases their complex worldview and, frankly, makes for sloppy history. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, it just doesn't work. So, by all means, take the stories, enjoy the drama, marvel at the diversity, but please, keep the nuance. It's the nuance that truly unlocks understanding. Conclusion, the takeaway. So, what did schools skip, really? What did those textbooks leave out? We've seen that Mesopotamia could bless love in its temples while simultaneously policing it in its streets. Ancient Greece, in its pursuit of excellence, turned romance into both a classroom for learning and a battlefield for warriors. Rome, ever pragmatic and power-obsessed, let its emperors flaunt their boyfriends with impunity, yet harshly jailed commoners for the exact same acts. And Egypt, in its enigmatic way, painted affection in stone but left the captions tantalizingly blank, inviting us to ponder. Across this incredible ancient world, same-sex desire showed up in every conceivable color: sacred, profane, legal, taboo, its acceptance or rejection painted not by some universal, inherent morality, but by the shifting brushstrokes of power, class, and religion, rather than by the fixed labels we carry today. The real, profound lesson here: human sexuality has always been a shimmering, ever-changing kaleidoscope. The intricate pattern shifts with every turn of culture, every twist of societal values. Remember that the next time someone claims the past was simple, or rigidly straight, or devoid of complexity. History, my friends, is far queerer, messier, and infinitely more interesting than any textbook ever dared to admit. And isn't that a story worth telling?